Serious. Parents of Reddit, what was a legit reason why you didn't let your son or daughter have that friend over or go to a sleepover? Story 1. One of our friends is a granddaughter who was treated horribly by her parents. They ignored her and just locked her in her room. When she was young, it wasn't that bad when she came over. She would act out from time to time, but she was just so happy to be somewhere else, you could tell. It made us feel wonderful that we could provide that, and we did so often. We tried to basically make our house a second home for her. However, as she got older, she started acting out more and more. It reached the point when she was 7 that she was stealing money from our child's piggy bank. She got into my wife's purse and stole money. We then caught her stealing toys to take home with her. She would run around saying, "F you, Jesus," in all sorts of different ways to say that word. We'd take them to the park and she would go into literal fist-throwing fights with other kids. These sorts of things started happening every time she was over. It went from, "We feel so great that we can give her a break from her troubled home life," to, "Sorry, but she just can't come over anymore." And we felt awful. But she had turned into a literal terror and nothing we tried would get us out of it. The turning point was when she smacked our youngest across the head with a wooden toy, and he needed to get stitches. We tried to get CPS involved, but they basically said, as long as she's going to school, getting fed, and not being physically or there's nothing we can do. Last I heard, she's in prison for assault and drug charges. Story 2. Not the parent, but the sister. My brother had a girlfriend in high school, his first ever real girlfriend, and my mom did not like her. All 3 of us went to the same high school together, and this girl gloomed onto me as super sweet buddy-buddy BFFs when she got with my brother. But my mom didn't trust the girl. She didn't like the girl, and her dismay and apprehensions mounted the longer my brother knew her. We're only talking about a couple of weeks to a few months, but it culminated into my brother hanging out at her house to visit her for dinner one evening, and then declaring he wasn't coming home, but he was going to stay there for the night. And apparently her parents were backing him up on this on the phone. My mom wasn't having that. She stuffed me in the car and peeled out of the driveway. It wasn't just my brother being defiant, he'd done that before. Something felt really off about this to her. We got to the apartment complex where the family lived, and I helped her locate the apartment. I was in the car because I had been there before. I in no way wanted to be part of the situation whatsoever. Nonetheless, I go up to the door and knock because we figure he will come out and talk to me. He does come out. He talks, my mom talks, and the girlfriend comes out and starts screaming. At this point, I've locked myself in the car and rolled up the window because I don't want to be any part of this. I remember her parents standing on the balcony and yelling down at my mom and my brother below. We qualified for Jerry Springer at that point. It was all beyond ridiculous. Eventually, my mom got my brother back in the car. She made me sit in the back seat so he could sit in the front seat, and I remember arguing about the fact that I should get to sit in the front seat because I wasn't the one who had caused all the problems that night. Oh, Jesus. Well, she got him in the front seat and put me in the back and gave him a reaming from 6 ways to Sunday all the way home. I don't know specifics. I just remember her saying things like, "It doesn't add up and there's something wrong here and this just isn't right." Parents don't co-sign their teenage daughter doing that and back the guy up in defiance to his parents when his parents said no, that there was something wrong with these people. There was definitely something wrong with these people. 7.5 to 8 months later, the girl gave birth to a baby. She was pregnant. She knew she was pregnant, and she wanted my brother to think he was the father. He and she had never had That was going to be their night. Her parents were betting her in the ruse. For a couple of years after that, when my brother wanted to do something stupid, all my mom had to do was look at him and say that girl's name out loud. Her name wasn't Miranda, but let's say it was. She would just look at my brother and say, "Miranda?" Then he would instantly stop pursuing whatever stupid thing he was trying to talk his way into getting to do. I talked to my brother recently, and apparently, Miranda went around the school for the rest of the school year, at least until the baby came, I guess, telling everyone that I was a lesbian and she had a lesbian affair with me, or something. I have no idea. The news never got back to me, but apparently, my brother knew all about it, and he said everyone in the school was talking about it. It did explain some weird things people said to me, but I never made the connection at the time. Not that what she said matters to me today, especially since I never knew about it at the time. So, there's a story of a parent pulling their son out of an extremely toxic situation she had bad feelings about. Story 3. I no longer allowed my son's best friend to come to our place or for him to go over to his, after the best friend's mom reported us to the police as harboring a runaway. This was after the best friend had been tossed out of his mom's house and told to spend the night sleeping outside, and she refused our phone calls to find out what was going on. So yes, I wasn't going to let a 16-year-old spend the night in 30-degree weather with nowhere to go. Sue me. The cops showed up and said she'd reported us as harboring a runaway. We explained what was happening and got treated like dirt and told that from now on we had to have full permission from the mom. Fine. We urged my son's friend to go to the police, report to them what was happening, and left it at that. The mom tried to apologize 3 days later for being off her meds and say it was okay for my son to go to their house and vice versa. and I politely refused and hung up while she was screaming at me. I'd always been kind of uncomfortable with a woman, and that just sealed it. They were still friends at school, but there was no more hanging out at either one's house. I explained why, and they both agreed to the rules. The son is in the military now, and doing quite well. No longer has contact with his mother. Gee, I wonder why. Story 4. The kid has severe behavior issues and is super violent and destructive. The one and only time he came to our house, he threw all of my daughter's underwear around the room to embarrass her. The worst incident happened at school though, when he tried to choke her out. They were 5 years old at the time. I feel bad for the kid, and all I know is his mom is doing everything she can to help him, but I just can't allow that kind of behavior around my kids and in my home. Story 5. Early 90s. The kids on the street decided to have a camp out in someone's front yard. Little fire, ghost stories, s'mores, tents, the whole bit. Middle of the night, one of the kids starts screaming that someone is on him. Turns out, another kid that just moved in had stripped down naked and smeared poop all over himself and attempted to do something to a sleeping kid. Parents all came out after hearing the screaming. The poop kid threw a dump in the street and threw some at the parents of yet another kid. Again, it was the early 90s in the Midwest, so this display didn't go well. The parents went crazy. I never saw the poop king again, and his family moved away. Story 6. My son started public school after going to Montessori school in 4th grade. I met another mom whose son started private school the same year. My son was weird about befriending her son, and I wasn't sure why. Shortly into the friendship, the single mom started asking if her kid could sleep over every Friday. I was fine with that. Then it became school nights. Not so fond of that. Her son started showing up at 6:30 a.m. before school when we were all still sleeping. My son made other friends and just tolerated friendship with her kid. We explained that his home life wasn't great and he didn't have anyone most of the time. Halfway through the following school year, the kid brought a knife to school and pulled it on my son. The school did nothing. Baltimore. So I contacted her to let her know what happened. Her response was that he was such a goof. My son was rightfully avoiding him at this point, and the mom had the audacity to contact me and ask if we could watch her son for half a school week because she really wanted to go on spring break out of state with friends. She's in her late 30s getting a PhD in psychology. I had to tell her she and her kid were never going to be invited again. Story 7. I'm the kid in this story. When I was growing up, there was a girl that lived across the street, about a year younger than me. I'm a guy, which plays a role in a bit. Her parents were addicted to, I believe. One day, as a kid, saw her dad on the roof of his house grilling hamburgers while doing push-ups. Yeah. Anyway, after that, my mom would not let me stay at this girl's house, although she would still stay the night at mine. However, as we got older, my mom stopped letting her stay at her house, also because she was afraid we might start having sex. And she was especially afraid the girl might use her pregnancy with me as a way to get out of her home situation. That's the reason my mom gave it to me anyways. When I was an adult, obviously. Sadly, the girl's life never really improved. When we got to high school, she started dating this older guy who apparently doesn't know how to yield in a left turn, and she died in the resulting crash. Years later, now that I'm older and can look back on it, the whole situation makes me really sad. She never even made it to 16. Story 8. I know the band kid. He would break stuff, hide from you, hit the dogs, and he'd be rude and physically abusive to my grandmother. He'd pinch her for literally no reason, and probably the little kid punched her a few times. He would scream for no reason, and no matter what you did for the punishment, he'd ignore it. My mom physically threw him and all his toys out of our house one day after he hit a couple of dogs and pinched my grandmother in quick succession, and he just stood outside and fake cried, telling us to let him back in. We lived in the middle of nowhere with no neighbors or traffic. He wasn't in any danger, and if he actually thought about it, he could have found his way back in. I think an hour of peace went by and she finally let him back in. Stories from school include walking out of class and into another and then beating a kid up, pulling a girl down by her ponytail and wailing at her, attempting to stab a kid with scissors, and being such a handful the teacher tried to get him moved to a special needs school. He was 5 and all of that was going on. He's 6 now and medicated with therapy and doing insanely better. His mom is moving cross-country with him to be with our family so they can help look after him. He was banned from a lot of school events and didn't have many friends, but that's turning around now. Story 9. She was a chronic liar. My daughter met her in kindergarten. She lied constantly about everything. One day, my daughter asked us to help her put together a birthday card and make a homemade present for her friend's birthday. But when she brought the gifts to school, it turned out the girl had lied about what day her birthday was. I didn't want to put down my daughter's first good friend, but I refused to have them spend more time together than was necessary. I was relieved when she started ending every story about something her friend had said with, "It's probably not true though." She outgrew that friend after a few months, met the girl's parents later in the year. That poor kid never had a chance. The parents were concerned with themselves. They were divorced and the mom was living with her new boyfriend. I got into a conversation with the mother during after-school pickup. Parents let the kids run around on the playground with friends, so there's some time to kill. Anyway, first half hour into our first encounter, she goes into several major scandals between her and her ex-husband and her boyfriend. Some of it pretty in nature. One thing she always said was, "Can you believe he'd do X horrible thing to my daughter?" Regardless of whether the daughter had been involved. I got the vibe from them that their daughter was a pawn, and that their home life was chaotic. The ex-husband had face tats and a record, and he asked an elementary school teacher if he could bring beer to field day. The field day thing happened much later, long after my daughter stopped hanging out with the other girl. Sometimes when I think my life is chaotic or messy, I think of him. Story 10. I was in a situation that set off my early warning senses. We were staying at the house of the daughter of my in-laws' friends. She had a 3-year-old son. My daughter was 5. They played well together, but I got some weird vibes that told me that my daughter shouldn't be crashing in the living room in a sleeping bag. I had her sleep with my wife in the guest bed while I slept on the couch. I kept a close watch on the kids the rest of the evening. The next day, as we were leaving, the 3-year-old basically tackled my daughter. He was big, she was very small, and tried to mount and hump her on the floor. I extracted her and told him that wasn't appropriate. My daughter laughed it off as he was trying to wrestle with her. Once in the car, I told my wife under no circumstances would our daughter ever be allowed back in that house. Ever. She agreed. We later learned that the then boyfriend of the woman with a son used to let the boy watch hardcore with him. Mom found out when CPS got involved. Story 11. My daughter is not allowed to stay at A's house, and A can only come to ours during the day, but never overnight. We allowed her to stay the night there one time last year, and the stories that came back from a single night were completely unacceptable. Here are a few. The dad has a room that no one is allowed to go in, not even the mom. When he's going into it or coming out of it, he knocks on the door and everyone has to look in the other direction. The windows of that room are even blocked out with black trash bags. A said she has seen the inside of the room before and there's just a couch, a TV, and an Xbox One. I don't care. My daughter is never going to go there. The dad also apparently has a lot of friends that visited all through the night. Most friends never actually came into the house. None of them knocked on the front door. The dad would either get a message or just know they were there and hang out with them for a little while by the back door. In the morning, before I picked my daughter up, she and A were outside playing with the dogs. My daughter is well-mannered, and when A's dad asked her if she had put her breakfast plate away, she answered, "Yes, sir." Well, apparently what he heard was, "Yes, Sergeant," and it royally pissed him off. He started screaming at A that her friends are disrespectful and that my daughter wasn't allowed back in his house. He then referred to himself in the third person as Sergeant for the rest of the day, and I am told it was until way after my daughter was gone. A told my daughter at school that it had all been straightened out and her dad felt bad about the misunderstanding and wants her to come to stay the night again, and will take them four-wheeler riding in the woods as an apology. Number 1, they don't have four-wheelers, so how is this even possible? Number 2, no freaking way my daughter is going out in the woods with this guy. If you're wondering, no, he did not let my daughter back in the house. A had to pack up her things for her, which her dad watched her do to make sure she wasn't taking anything of theirs. When I got there, they were sitting outside. I had no idea why, nor did I think anything of it till I got the previously mentioned story. Also, what was packed up for my daughter as her stuff was not all of her stuff, and we had to make a run to the store later for a toothbrush and a shampoo. She also didn't get any of her dirty clothes back, and A insisted at school that she couldn't find anything else of my daughter's at their house. A would not fit in my daughter's clothes, nor would her mother, so my daughter's new size 0 jeans, small shirt, small exercise bra, and panties somehow just vanished. The mom also did not speak the whole night. She just watched TV and would get up to get something for her husband or make him dinner, and she also did not make them dinner. They had some popcorn and made their own breakfast in the morning. These girls were 16 at the time. I wish my daughter would have called me to say things were a bit odd. I would have come to get her sooner. Since this incident, we now have a coded message because she said she didn't know what to say even if she did call me. So now if something is amiss and she's uncomfortable, she is to call or message me asking where her next orthodontist appointment is. It lets me think of the reason she has to be picked up and she does not have to feel awkward or in any way disrespectful. I have also told her it's perfectly acceptable to just say she wants to go home, but I also understand where that can escalate an already bad situation. She can't stay the night at our house because when A stayed at our house, her dad would call her randomly, even at 4 a.m. She missed the call once around 12:30 a.m. and immediately called him back. He was already in his car driving to our house to get her because she didn't answer and I had to listen to a teenager talk her own dad out of a screaming rage. It was disgusting. Now I'm not going to have that around my daughter. I have not stated as much to my daughter, but I am perfectly happy that she and A do not hang out anymore. Story 12. My parents went to drop off my stuff at a friend's house because I wanted to spend the night. They walked in, and my dad said, "Nope, you're coming home." She had 2 brothers, one was super nice, and one was very touchy. Her dad then threatened my dad and said he can't take a child out of his home without his permission. My dad is 6'3" and a large dude, got in his face, her dad looked like a string bean, and said he was taking me home right now. My dad told me later he had a really bad gut feeling something bad would happen if I stayed. Her touchy brother is in jail now. For what? I'm not even sure. Story 13. 2 different friends with moms that smoked, one in 5th grade and one in 6th. They actually both lived with us at one point or another. The kid in 5th grade was a nice guy, a little hyper and kind of mischievous, but had a really good heart when you take his home environment into account. He ended up staying with us for a week when his mom lost the house they lived in. I think after that, he went to live with a relative. I didn't see him again until we were adults, and he just happened to come into my work. He's a bodybuilder now. My mom stopped letting me go over to his place long before he came to stay with us, though. Apparently, one time his mom just straight up asked my mom if she wanted to smoke some with her, which she declined and quickly got us the hell out of there. The kid in 6th grade was introduced to me through a mutual friend. I came home from a weekend at his place and told my mom about my time over there. She asked me a bunch of follow-up questions, ending with, "Does it smell like they have cats?" I told her yes, and she asked, "But they don't have any cats, do they?" And I said no, I didn't see any. She gave me a solemn look and said that I wasn't allowed to go there anymore, but he was allowed to stay over here. After a few years of us being friends, his mother dropped him off at my place one night with no warning. I know his mom had a heart-to-heart with mine, saying that she knew she was going to be arrested soon and that our house was the safest possible place for her son, as my mom was the only person she was even acquainted with that wasn't a drug addict. This kid and I had become extremely close over the years, and my mom loves him very much. So without blinking, she agreed to take custody of him. So he became my adopted brother, sort of. Flash forward. A CPS agent is at our door with a custody release form. She tells my mom that my friend, or brother's dad, has been cleared to take custody. My friend wants to live with his dad more than anything, so my mom tearfully gives up custody. I see him at school a week later, and he tells me he's been put in a foster home. He was never going to his dad's at all. It took years for him to believe that CPS had deceived my mother into giving up custody and that we didn't just give him away. It makes me want to cry thinking about him, feeling like we abandoned him. He graduated high school in the foster care system and joined the Marines. I haven't seen him in 6 years. I miss my brother. Story 14. The kid was on serious medication for major behavioral issues, and the kid's sibling was the favorite. Parents would dump said unwanted kid at our house without medication because it was good to take a break from antipsychotics. I say unwanted kid because he'd come over on an empty stomach and left for hours after the promised pickup time. Well, they took this other kid out to eat and shop. They also didn't offer snacks or drinks and eventually banned reciprocal visits. The kid tried to commit suicide at one point. It was institutionalized where, wonder of wonders, not taking a weekend break from medication left him much more stable. This happened about 10 years ago. CPS got involved after the kid was institutionalized and things got better for him at least. The ban on reciprocal visits happened after there were some strong words about their parenting decisions. Having kids doesn't fix relationship problems.